What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my watch list for Game Week 23. So I'm going to go through some of the players that I've got my eye on for the next few weeks. And we're going to start off with Reece James. Now, I know he splits opinion in the FPL community. You've got people like me that love the potential upside, clean sheets, assists, goals. He costs less than 6 million as well. There's lots to like. But on the other hand, there's lots of people that just look at him as he gets too many 1 and 2 pointers. The injury record is not great, especially this season, and also you've got the early subs to contend with as well, like what happened against Fulham. Now, to be fair, Graham Potter did say, he's just back in the squad, he can't play 90 minutes yet, so an early sub was always likely, but obviously if he just played another 30-40 seconds, he would have got 6 points instead of 1, so it was a little bit unlucky as well. And I do think in that game there were glimpses of how attacking he can be, all right? Just in case you've forgotten. I think in general, that Chelsea team under Potter has been changed a lot. They've used a lot of different combinations and players. And so there isn't really a chemistry built up with Reece James and Ziyech, for example. But there were a few times where he was about to bomb forward and the ball just didn't get played in. And in another game, that ball gets played, he maybe gets a goal, possibly gets an assist, and suddenly we're looking at a big score, as long as he's on the pitch for another 30-40 seconds. So there's a lot to like. Also with Chelsea, as I mentioned last week, they are important to us in the fact they don't blank in 25 or 28, but of course you've got to get the right players as well. It's not just a case of doubling or tripling up just because of the fixtures, but they do look pretty good. Spurs away in 25 is going to be difficult, but at least they have a fixture. And in Game Week 28, which is going to be another blank game week because of the FA Cup results, Chelsea will definitely play Everton at home. And in between, you've got West Ham away, Southampton at home, Leeds at home, Leicester away. And as long as Reece James is fit and available, there's no fixture there I would be worried about having to play him, especially when he costs less than 6 million. And we're about to get into a period of FPL where I don't know if there is a huge amount of other FPL defender options. Like if we look at the team I'm currently on, so Trippier is not really going anywhere for most people. And look, Liverpool really bad right now, but there is a potential for Newcastle to concede against them if Klopp can somehow get them, I don't know, playing some football or something, right? So they could concede there. Then they got a blank. Then it's Man City away. I know all the things people say about Trippier. He scored in the previous games. And I'm not sat here telling you to get rid of Trippier. Far from it. I've got no plans to do that. But the idea of doubling up on them right now is probably not something that most people want to do unless they're already on the double up. Even with like a Man United defender like Luke Shaw, they are about to, not straight away, but they're about to go into a blank in 25, a Liverpool away game in 26, obviously all the same things apply. Right now that looks like a good potential for a clean sheet. But you could see Liverpool scoring in that game. And then they're probably going to blank in 28 as well. So Man United aren't that great to us. Right now they're good, but in a few game weeks that's not going to be the case. So we've got to start kind of looking ahead a little bit more, which is why I like Reece James. The problem is he is only just back from injury. The injury record hasn't been great. They're not going to want to do what they did last time, put him straight back in, not sub him early enough, and then get injured again, especially with Champions League coming back up. So I actually put the schedule together. So the next game is West Ham away in Game Week 23 on the 11th of February. It's only 4 days later that they play Dortmund away. And then 3 days later, they got to play Southampton at home in Game Week 24. Now, to be fair, after that Southampton game, there is a decent amount of rest until Spurs away. But you just wonder whether he's going to play both West Ham and Southampton. And to be fair, I don't think he's so good that you've got to rush out and buy him this week anyway. So you could kind of see what happens. Does he come through the West Ham game? Does he come through the Dortmund game? How many minutes does he get? Then maybe get him in Game Week 24. But there is a chance that the Southampton game is the one that he might end up missing, right? He's probably not going to play, or at least start, all of West Ham, Dortmund, Southampton and Spurs. And even when you look after that, there's a good rest between Spurs away and Leeds at home in 26. But then 3 days later, they got to play Dortmund at home. And unless they're like 4, 5, 6 goals up from the first leg, Reece James is first choice. And he's probably going to start that game. Because right now, the league doesn't look good for Chelsea. And therefore, they've possibly got to concentrate a little bit more on the Champions League. Obviously, they're still going to try and get into the top 4. But that is looking more and more difficult. So even as a die-hard Reece James FPL fan, I'm still not sure we're going to get enough games here to warrant going for him straight away. That doesn't mean that I don't want a Chelsea defender entirely. We could look at And I'm going to try and get this pronunciation right, because I think I got it wrong the other day. Because I think there's an I in there I hadn't spotted. Badiashile? Maybe something like that. He's only 5 million. Now, the interesting thing about him is he started the last 3 games for 90 minutes. Has also looked very good already, and they haven't registered him in the Champions League squad. Now, you might turn around and say, if he's that good, why haven't they registered him? But they could only register 3 new signings. So I think they chose Mudryk, João Felix, and Enzo Fernandez, of course. So there's kind of a reason why he hasn't been picked, just because there was 3 other more attacking options. I guess not with Enzo Fernandez, but they need him in the squad as well, who they just went for instead. So it looks like Badiashile, around all those games when there's fixtures in quick succession, he may well get the majority of the Premier League games. Now, again, it's not quite as simple as that, because, players like Koulibaly, Fofana when he's back as well, they're probably not necessarily going to go from playing 0 minutes in the league to suddenly playing Champions League. But I think in the longer term, like over that fixture schedule I just talked about, I think Badiashile could get most of those fixtures in the Premier League, and he only costs 5 million. And if we can't rely on Reece James to make it past 60 minutes enough, at least in the short term, it might be worth looking against him. I'm a little bit torn on it, because I do love Reece James, and I think right now when we haven't got a Cancelo or a Trent that we can rely on, I want a bit of excitement back in my FPL team, and Reece James does provide that. There's just a little bit of downside as well. So I think Chelsea are right at the top of the kind of teams that I want to try and target if I can, knowing that there's a lot of competition there. Reece James is the number 1 defender I want. Obviously, Chilwell's back as well, so we'll see what happens there. But going for a centre-back might actually be the play. And Thiago Silva's only missed 2 games all season. So for 5.5 million, I haven't completely written him off either. And I think Kepa's doing well. Enzo Fernandez is going to improve them. And I think, yes, they are having issues in attack, but from a defensive point of view, I think they're looking pretty good right now. So next up is Craig Dawson, which is, of course, a little bit of a knee-jerk, because he played against Liverpool in game week 22. He got the clean sheet and the goal as well, but it was just a nice reminder about how good he can be in the air from set pieces. His goal threat's always been pretty decent, as I'll show you in a second, but also I think it was a bit of an indicator into what the centre-back partnership will be for Wolves going forward, because before Craig Dawson was signed by Wolves, it was Collins and Kilman, and as soon as Dawson was available, he was thrown straight in against Liverpool, which is a fairly tough game. And I know we're sitting here saying Liverpool are rubbish, and I completely get that, and I agree they have not been good the last few games, but I don't think a manager is going to take that for granted. So I think there's a lot of trust there to put Dawson straight in. Maybe it's for the experience, I don't know, but it does look good for him going forward. Now, of course, they do now have Dawson, Kilman and Collins, so any 2 of those 3 could play. I'm not saying he's absolutely nailed on, but it does look pretty good, and I think Wolves fixtures are decent as well. They'll play in the game week 25 blank. They may play in the game week 28 one. I'll come on to that in a second. And while a lot of people have got players like Bueno on the bench, he didn't play in the last game, so he's a bit of a rotation threat as well, because Nuri can play left back. So if we can nail down one of the centre backs, and a Wolves player fits into our squad, our strategy, our transfers, he could be the one worth looking at, because he has scored a few goals in his career, like in the Premier League and stuff like that. Now, fixture-wise, it is worth talking about. He is only 4.8 million. He's not someone that you're going to want to play every single week, especially with those fixtures. They are not perfect, but I think Southampton away and Bournemouth at home are not bad fixtures. And for me, I would play him for Wolves at home to Bournemouth ahead of someone like Ben White, for example, away to Villa in game week 24. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go out of your way to be able to bench Ben White, but it's just another plus for having Dawson in your team if it fits in with the rest of your strategy. He plays in 25. It's not necessarily a great shot at a clean sheet. I've got Mitrovic, for example, so I'd have to line them up against each other. But again, it's not a bad player to have to play, especially when even if he concedes, he can get you a goal the other end. 26 and 27, you're probably not going to want to play him unless you absolutely have to. And the Leeds at home fixture is not guaranteed to be on. That is one of the ones that could get called off because of the FA Cup. Now, Leeds are in the 5th round against either Sunderland or Fulham. You would imagine that Fulham will win the 4th round replay, which we'll know before the game week 23 deadline, and then Fulham will be favourites to beat Leeds at home as well. The thing for me is right now, and I will talk more about my team later on in the week, I've got Salah and Mitrovic from Liverpool and Fulham, one of those two games will be on in game week 28. Either Liverpool or Fulham or Wolves and Leeds, or possibly both of them, but we won't get into that scenario right now. So by going for a Wolves player, I'm kind of hedging my bets that in game week 28, if Liverpool and Fulham is off, then I can just deal with those two players if I still own them by that point. And I've got Dawson just waiting on the bench. Obviously, this is a lot of hope, because the hope that he's still first choice, the hope that they can keep some clean sheets in those easier games, the hope that that Leeds game is on. But I am probably looking for a cheap defender this week, and he's just someone that obviously caught my eye because of how well he did in game week 22. That then led me to look at the Wolves fixtures, which I think I kind of overlooked a little bit. So I'm not saying get him in your team and just play him for the next 6 game weeks. I'd want to bench him if I can in 26 and 27. But outside of that, it looks pretty good. So not a bad option. I don't think because of the Bueno bench and I'd be looking at him. So we're looking at one of the centre-backs instead. And I think if Craig Dawson can nail down that play, especially if you don't have to buy him straight away, he's probably the one that I would go for less than 5 million. So it's not just a Chelsea defender that I'm potentially looking at, but also maybe an attacker. Now, I know what everyone is going to say. They've got so many attacking options. It's impossible to find one that's nailed on, that's going to get good minutes, and therefore we should just ignore them completely. And to be honest, I do tend to agree with that. I just wonder if someone like João Felix for 7.5 million could be an option. Now, for my FPL squad, it definitely helps that he's a forward, and I'll show you that in a second. But I keep thinking about him because, yes, Chelsea have made a lot of signings, and there's some big money for some young players like Mudryk, for example. And I'm sure that Todd Boehly wants them to provide value to Chelsea straight away. But part of that transfer is for the future. Whereas with João Felix, he's been loaned until the end of the season because he's a good player with experience. And presumably, there is a plan to use him. And he did look very good in the only game he's played for Chelsea so far. At least right up until the point he got red carded, which is why he's on -2 points per game. But he was creating chances. He also had a lot of shots. And I would be hopeful that that would continue going forward. Like, we all know he's a good player. But if you look at his expected goal involvement over his career that we have the numbers for, so before he signed for Chelsea, he was at 0.59 at Atletico. The season before was 0.69, and this is expected goal involvement per 90 minutes, 0.47, 0.51 and 0.81. Just a really good all-round player. And from an FPL point of view, 7.5 million is pretty decent. And I'm not necessarily expecting him to start 6 in every 6 games. It could be 5 in 6. But surely at some point soon, even Graham Potter, that likes to tinker around with, formations and setup and tactics and personnel, the January transfer window is closed. He knows which players he's got, which ones he wants to use more often than not. There has to be at least like a core of 6 to 8 players that are going to play the majority of games where they're fit and available. And I just think that João Felix could be one of them. I could be completely wrong, right? I might be talking absolute rubbish, but maybe he could. Now, for my squad, which I just talked about in terms of the forward slot, I do think to cover the blanks in 25 and 28, I'm not sure how much more I can carry Greenwood from Leeds, because yes, I can use transfers on the rest of the team, but at some point I'm going to want to carry them through, like Trippier and Rashford in 25, for example. So it'd just be handy to have a forward in that slot and maybe a slightly cheaper midfielder instead. So like Fernandes and Greenwood could be João Felix and Mitoma, for example, at some point, or the same with Salah, right? So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. And if you look at the other forwards that are available, everyone's got Haaland. Yes, I would love Kane, and maybe I will actually look to see if I can get him in. But if not, I need to go cheaper. Tony's going to blank in 25. Nketiah is a good option, but I've already got a triple up on Arsenal. And I think if I do swap anyone from Arsenal, it'll probably just be Martinelli to Odegaard. I don't think I'll actually go for Nketiah. Watkins for Villa. They play in both blank 25 and 28. Everton away in 25. Then it's Palace at home, West Ham away, Bournemouth at home. So he could be an option, right? Nailed on, definitely. But outside of that, there's not a huge amount more players to look at, which is why I'm looking at João Felix. Now, we can look at the sheer ridiculous amount of players that Chelsea have from an attacking sense, and I do think that Havertz is also one to look at for just 7.8, so he's only 0.3 million more, because he is starting very regularly as Chelsea's number 9. Like, Aubameyang just isn't in favour at all. The only problem is, that is then, if we think that he's going to keep starting, that's one less slot for João Felix to fit into. And the way they were lined up in the last game, with the back four, then Enzo Fernandez, then Gallagher and Mount in front, there's only 3 spots in front of them, because essentially it's like a 4-3-3 variation. So if Havertz is going to be the number 9, you've got those 2 wider slots, or the players that are playing off him, and you've got Mudryk and João Felix, and Sterling's back, and Ziyech played the last game, and Pulisic will be back from injury at some point, and that's not even all the players to mention. And I know that people keep saying that João Felix can play, where is he on air? He's up here. They've got so many players, you've got to go to page 2. Can play as a false 9, and I'm sure he can, he's done that before, etc. But everything I read when he came into Chelsea was that he's better playing off someone else, like off someone like Havertz, and therefore there's a lot of competition on that kind of left side, which is where you'd expect him to play the majority. So I'm not sitting here telling you that João Felix is this great option we should all run out and buy, because I cannot tell you he's nailed on. And like with Reece James, I don't necessarily want to buy them in game week 23, but I would like to see how they line up in that game, and then maybe think about getting them for kind of future game weeks, only because there's a lack of options. I think when Tony's getting a run of games, he's not blanking and stuff like that, I'd rather have him instead. If I could pivot to Nketiah easy enough, I would, but I can't. So maybe I could look at something maybe new, interesting, exciting in João Felix. I guess we'll see how they do against West Ham and then go from there. Let me know down below whether you think he'll get good enough minutes to be an option, or whether we should just ignore him whatsoever. What are your thoughts on the other players I've mentioned in this video? Give it a like if you enjoyed it, hit subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.